Well, hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Sharon Vornholt, and I'm so happy you're tuning in today. My guest today is Jason Yarusi, who is the founder of Yarusi Holdings, along with his wife, Pili. They have acquired $180 million in real estate across 1,900 multifamily units since 2017. He is an avid ultra runner and a workout enthusiast, and Jason also hosts the Multifamily Live Podcast and the Figure Multifamily Mastermind. This is the thing that has me so intrigued. He wakes up every day at 4:32 a.m. And most importantly, he's a husband and the father to 3 amazing kids. So welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
At 4:32, is there a reason it's not 4:30 or it's 4:31 or?
You know, when you started setting that stage, we always find ways to give ourselves outs, especially as you grow up, right? You know, your parents saying, get up for school or this or that, or someone watching over you. And so part of this is that first decision of the day is so important, right? Because you can really set the stage for really a lot of the rest of your day and really your future. So getting up at 4:32, it's 4, 3, 2, 1, go, and just get out of bed. Because typically from a stance of just think of anything of hitting that snooze button, it's your first choice you're making on the day. But typically, if you just get out of bed, you're not going to get back in bed, right? So that first moment is just comparative to how you can set the stage for a lot of things, noting just getting yourself out of bed, getting yourself moving. And that's their first goal to accomplish each and every morning.
Well, that's genius. 4, 3, 2, 1. Mel Robbins has a similar thing, the 5-second rule. So that I know that's very powerful. Not hitting the snooze button, making the decision to get up and do whatever.
You know, the Mel Robbins thing is very interesting too, because we can all have different events happen to us, right? But our reaction to it is what really sets the premise for how we're going to go at it, right? And trust me, we all deal with things that are difficult in our lives, whether it be just to ourselves or to others around us. But our reaction to how we show up to it can really set the stage of where we go. And she has a great point that when something's happening, sure, give yourself a moment, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then move, right? Because typically if you do that, it's usually the pace that we start setting our own stage, right? We start setting our own stage in our day, in our mind of how horrible something is. And a lot of this comes down to your mentality about how you're looking at it, right? And so if we say, okay, 5, 3, 4, 2, 1, that wasn't great, but now stop, take a moment, and now you can have a clean thought of how to react. And that gives us the best ability to look at it and say, okay, that is what's in front of me. And I can either dwell on it, I can already perceive, or I can already think about all the horrible things that are potentially going to happen, which 99% of the time don't, right? But our mind takes us to that point where we go there and we assume the worst. When we can backtrack and say, okay, this is what it is. Is there a lesson here? Is there a path forward? Is there a good direction I can go that may be unknown, but at least can give me more clarity? So many times we have the doubt and the fear, right? And the doubt and the fear, specifically even real estate, keep us from doing anything, right? So talk about anything. Oh, I'm going to flip my first home, and the second I'm going to get in there, someone's going to come break in and be a squatter, and then all of a sudden it's going to cost overrun. Then they're going to come, the bank's going to take it back. They're going to take everything I'm worth. They're going to come steal my dog, right? And you're like, where did that go, right? Where the first step is, okay, I want to flip a house. Maybe I should start listening to Sharon's podcast, right? Start learning more about the process, or attend a meetup and see other contractors, or stop by someone's project, right? To get myself more knowledgeable. Because we find that we think of the outcome without really thinking of the first step to get there. And that can be good and bad, right? That can lead you to that destination. So we're constantly thinking of the bad. It's already putting ourselves in a weak position because we're not able to make strong choices and learn to ask good questions to get the results that are going to get us to our goal and our outcome.
And how many times have we done that? You just gave the perfect example. We have not bought our first property, and yet we've already seen all the terrible things, like you said, which probably won't happen, or they won't happen all at once, at least. Maybe one thing or two will happen, but you cannot not start because of some imaginary scenario that you have built up in your mind.
Sure. And when you put that into stage, if you can come up with the worst case of what can happen, well, on the other side, then you have to be fair to yourself and say, well, then the best case is also a possible scenario, right? And so if that's the stage, then what's the risk for getting out there and taking that first step and being able to adapt to it, right? And that usually keeps most people from acting and keeping us stuck where we are, because we get comfortable in a stage we don't want to be, but at least it's known, right? We'll have people that, will go through their life not happy with where they are, right? So it's just say getting up, right? You get up late, right? You get out of bed, you stub your toe, you rush down, you're late to work, so you eat something poor, you can't really see with your family, you get out, you get stuck in traffic, you now get to work, whether on time or late, there's a bunch of fires at work, and you get to the end of the day, and then you get back in traffic, you get home, you say, never again, and the same thing repeats and can repeat for weeks and decades and forever, right? But in that phrase, because of this thought of doubt, where if you try anything different, that'll be that much worse, you'll keep yourself in that same stage of just being kind of unhappy, right? We get too comfortable with the moments of time. But we also have to reflect on like, okay, this is just a moment of time, right? When we have our thoughts today, we can all potentially think back to 5 years ago or 10 years ago, when you thought there was something that was so impossible, you will never get through it. And now today, you have now grown so much that you don't even remember that event. And two, you did get through it, right? Because you're sitting here listening to the podcast today. So when we can give ourselves grace at the same time, be committed to just learn better questions, we ultimately find that the solutions for us are all around us. We just have to ask the question to find the best route to get there.
Let me ask you this. So you started in single family homes. Is that correct? You and Pili started in single family. Did you always have this mindset back from the single family days, or is this something that you've developed over time?
Oh, it's constant development, right? As you grow up in a point, right, you're learning parts, and sure, things come up in life that give you different clarity on different points, right? And when you're into something, you have to say, okay, I'm doing this. And like the single family, we were doing good, right? But we weren't doing great. And a lot of that was coming down from us, right? It was just looking at what is the issue. And many times it's pointing to us, right? Not pointing outwards. We have to look inwards. And our goal when we first moved out to New York City was to, of course, help my dad, because his construction business just exploded due to Hurricane Sandy, right? He does a lot with flood mitigation. So his business exploded. So Pili and my brother, who was working for me at the time in New York City, we wanted to help dad. We knew this was going to be a gap, right? Where it was great to help dad, but it was never a business we wanted to be involved in. Yeah. But at that same time, we wanted to set the stage that we could set up a life that we could control, that we could dictate. And Pili's pregnant with our first kiddo. We went out there and got active in real estate, doing flipping and wholesaling. So here we are, very busy helping dad. And now we've compiled all these other activities on top of it. So if our goal is to get back to control our day, spend time, if we want to go to our kids' any event, or we want to, take a moment or take a day off that we could choose to, and let alone we're doing all these activities between the construction and the single family where that idea is fleeting away, right? So all of a sudden we have less time than we ultimately had to start with because of the activities we were doing. And a lot of this was the mentality that we had to do everything, right? So when we started coming into rentals, it was getting back to our core nature, for which Pili and I had opened, some businesses in New York City, opened some restaurants, breweries, had run some bigger restaurants and bars. And we had come from this management part of empowering others to help the entire process forward. And we got away from that when we started into the flipping world, because we were doing everything ourselves. So the second that we could get back to investing in rentals, right? And this was our first foray into it. Well, we're investing 1,000 miles away, because at the time we were in New Jersey, and we're investing in states like Indiana, and then eventually, into Kentucky, right? So we had to empower teams to be able to do their best role to make the project successful, but it'll let us to use our time more accordingly to get there.
So I know this. So I'm in Louisville. So I know that you all have done some projects here, and you ultimately moved into multifamily, and you also moved to Tennessee.
Correct. Yeah. So Louisville was a great starting market. Still love it today, right? So we still have one property there, but between, it has population growth, moderate population growth, job growth, a ton of job diversity, great source of course, housing that fit the narrative for workforce housing, landlord friendly. So there was a lot of pieces of that puzzle that really fit the needs. And we got very specific where we want to invest into. So when we came into multifamily, we were doing at first for the rentals, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. And that was the evolution to say, that actually is a very fluent process that we could do well in. But the narrative to try to scale that became
Mhm.
overwhelming. Imagine having 50 duplexes around town, or enough to accommodate to get us to that lifestyle for which we wanted. Came
Mhm.
across podcasts just like this, where someone was talking about large apartment investing, and that was my first introduction to the model. And that fit all the pieces because we could get the economies of scale all under one roof, or just very, we'll say, buildings that were in the same near vicinity. So we
Mhm.
sold off those properties and went all into educating ourselves on that, but then took action. And one of those pieces of action was finding the market and surrounding ourselves with other people that were doing it successfully, so we could really make good decisions. So our first purchase back in 2017 was a 94 unit. That was in Louisville, Kentucky. And that was that pinnacle piece to get us out of the gate. And what most see is that you go from duplexes, triplexes to a 94 unit, and you're like, whoa, but we had
Well,
set our mind there first, right?
mhm.
We had set where we wanted to go, and then we were able to build back the road to get there. So, okay, what do we need? We need to surround ourselves with other people who are doing it successfully so we can learn how they were doing it. We need to make introductions, one to lenders, to property managers, to build up our investors, right? So we had basically built the boat, right? We built the vehicle, right, of where we wanted to go. So when the opportunity showed up, we were ready to move into the opportunity because we had already built the runway to land.
That is so powerful for people to understand. You talk about building the mindset. It so often our mindset holds us back. We might not even think subconsciously, oh, that's too big. I couldn't buy 90 plus units, but it's there lurking in our mindset. So you fix that problem. You started to build the boats, you built the resources, you learned. This is the other part. You can't get stuck in the learning part, but you have to learn these things before you can really do them. You need to learn, and then you need to take action. You need to implement. And I read this statement somewhere that I went down and looked it up again because I read it said, focus is so important because it's the gateway to all thinking, perception, memory, learning, reasoning, problem solving, and decision making. Without good focus, all aspects of your ability to think will suffer. That just kind of ties that up in a nice, neat little package of how important this is.
It's really great to say, because even today, like you grab this, right? Your focus goes out by just like
Out the window.
right?
Yeah.
Out the window, right? And so, and just in any part of real estate, that's the same thing, right? Because we could pick any different for it, right? So when we first started in the single family space, we were flipping, we were wholesaling, we were doing Airbnbs, and there was just a whole lot of stuff happening, but there was no desire focused, right? And so that limits your capacity to your upside. And if you look at really the success of large businesses, although they may look well diversified and they have a lot of different things running today, but you can think of anything from gyms to just Amazon, right? They start in one place and they really dive in to create the path forward. And when that path forward is so solidified, so rock solid, they're able to add other things on that can help accomplish the mission of where they're going to go. And large apartments, if you can understand why it makes sense, then you can make an educated decision if it's right for you. Because even with our mastermind, we'll hear a lot, well, should I start with a 10 unit before going to a 100 unit? And for me, it has nothing to do with the project itself. It has to do with your mind, right? Because to say that, oh, I want to learn to ride a bike, so I should go swim first, could be the same analysis right there, right? Because you don't have to, or maybe you do, but it's based on you. But if you can understand the reasonable approach of why a 100 unit would be more viable than 10 unit, right? So the 100 unit, say you have 5 vacant units, you're 95% occupied. If you have 5 vacant units and 10 unit, you're 50% occupied, right? You may have a hard time paying down really for your loan and your expenses. You get the economies of scale where you have more tenants that now can afford you more opportunities. So when you do certain things, say you go to a 10 unit and you change all the toilets, you may see a little bit difference in your water bill. But if you go to a 100 unit and change out your toilets, you may see a big bump or a big decrease in your water expenses that could really capitalize on your value. The larger property could allow you to hire a full-time staff, right? So that full-time staff, full-time leasing person, a full-time maintenance person that can be dedicated to the process, so you can treat them like a business, right? And you're able to accomplish more. And I like to equate a lot of things back to the restaurant business, right? If you have a 10-seat restaurant or you have a 100-seat restaurant, you may be like, well, that's more risk on the 100-seat. However, dinner is only the same 2 or 3 hours, right? So you have to turn those 10 seats so many times. With 100 units, you can do so many different ways to add value. The same thing goes for apartment buildings. You can have the cash flow, the appreciation, depreciation, debt pay down, tax advantages, so many different opportunities. And the larger that property can go, the more attractive it is to a lender, right? If we look at default rates, right, even back to 2007, the multifamily on its own was at such a low amount, due from the point that you had so many reasonable aspects for you to be able to accomplish the mission, to be able to pay your loan, right? So it puts you in the best spot forward. So the smaller the property, it puts you more risk. Now, can people do great in that space? Absolutely, right? And they do. However, it's a choice we made that we want to leverage the ability to go larger because it helped our business model to move forward at the fastest and most efficient pace.
I think that's an important point you made when looking at multifamily, that the lenders are more comfortable with bigger properties. I never really thought of it exactly in that way, but I mean, it makes perfect sense because at the end of the day, real estate is a math problem with some strategy behind it. Everything comes down to math. And like you said, with the toilets, with anything, it's all about the rate of return. What's it going to cost? What's it going to save? All of those sorts of things. But I don't think a lot of people think when they talk about scale, they don't necessarily think in those exact terms. They're thinking more about risk.
Yeah, and that's just a change of mindset, right? We have to look at a risk reward scenario. And when you think about the bigger asset, the reason that the banks see it more favorable is that they don't have to look at you, right? Because there's not so much potential if the property's not gonna be able to perform, then they have to look at your viability. It's more the potential for the property and the application what the business plan is, because it's going to have more worth to it in the future, right? There's also the buyer pool, which is always a very big back end, right? We can think about the buy today, but we want to think of who we're going to sell this to in the future. You're going to have a more sophisticated and more institutionalized perspective of a buyer in the future based on the size of assets, right? Because there becomes a certain point where a smaller property is going to be treated more as a sale by per unit, right? So how much is it cost per unit? Because it's going to be that potentially, mom and pop operator, or, someone who's maybe a doctor or just wants to, but they're going to look at it more subjectively by the unit. However, a larger group is going to look on the yield, right? They're going to say, okay, what's the cap rate? What's the potential cash flow stream that I can get from this property? So you're going to deal on a whole different paradigm. And banks understand that. And that's why these larger properties can typically afford some of the best leverage or best loan options to accommodate the property, because it's more inherent that the property will be able to sustain at this loan, where the building that's 10 units is going to be more subjective to a lot of things and may come back on you if we get to 50% occupied, that you have to come up and figure out how to pay the loan.
Yeah, that's an interesting way for folks to think about it. If they're on the fence about plan A, the smaller multifamilies, or plan B, the larger multifamilies, you just made a really good argument for why they should maybe think at least about the larger units. Now, do you have a sweet spot on the multifamilies, 200 units, 300 units? Do you have a number?
So when you think of the business side of it, the thing that gives you the ability to really leverage, right, is the team. And so when you look in this, there's even different stages of property managers, noting that most of our investments, now we're here in of course, south of Nashville, we still use third-party property management. So the larger you go, the more professional property management partners you will have as well.
Right.
It's harder to find property management companies for singles or, fourplexes or 10 units, because there's a lot more runaround that has to go with that management company. So they're not able to structure as well. So as you continue to move up, the same management company that can assist you on a single family or, 10 unit is not going to usually be a viable partner for the larger assets. No. So you typically find the single family, then you find the mid-range, and you find the bigger group. So we're always looking for properties that can sustain a professional property management company. Not to say there's not in the single family world, but you find more partners that are set up and strategized for this market. So we're looking, typically 75 units can be a sweet spot in the market or above. Really, where we find 75 to 150 units is a good realm for us, because it keeps us at a very competitive range, and also potentially can step us down from being competing with like REITs and institutions when we start getting to 200 or 300 property level.
But my youngest daughter manages a complex of 232 units, I think it is. So they are self-managed, but she's also worked with companies that you would know the names of, the bigger companies that manage a lot of the assets. So I'm pretty familiar with that world. Let me ask you this: when it comes to focus and habits, they're very closely tied together. Now, you have the habit of getting up at 4:31 every day. That's a habit. You've determined that you're going to do that. You're committed to doing that. What about other habits and focus? Let's talk about how you can tie these things together and change the way you do things.
I think if you improve 1% a day, and then that compounds throughout a year, it's something like 3,300% improvement in the course of a year. And so if you think about these habits, we all look at like the big jump, right? We want things to happen. It's like today, I'm going to go out there and find real estate and I'm going to sell it for $1 million, right? So,
right.
like, that's the big jump. However, the steps can get you there in a small fashion, but it's going to be that you can set up steps that slowly 1% each day improve you, or slowly 1% each day add or lack or detract from your life, right? And so setting up the first parts of our day allows me to control my day and how I react to it. So I get up at 4:32, I go have a glass of water, I have coffee, I meditate, I work out, right? When I get done working out, I come in, Pili's getting up, she can go have her time to now set her mind right, and then I'll have time with the kids, right? And so at that phrase, I've now created consistency and wins in my day, right? And those wins are very important because it says that I have now controlled what I can control. So as things come out throughout the day, right? So something happens, right? That's inopportune or just sidelines or part. I now don't have to think that I've now had all lack of control throughout the morning. I can now assess what's in front of me and be in control to focus on that. Because we get to the point, just like I talked about the scenario before, people get stuck in traffic and run around, is that the whole day starts in chaos, right? It's this elevated chaos, and you carry that through. So everything seems this pinnacle moment of chaos is compiling on, right? And so you're leveraging pour after pour after pour, and that hurts your mind to be able to make good decisions because you're reacting, not taking action to control the reaction.
So you're saying that you believe that is the one of the keys to your success is that getting up early and doing the things, the meditation, working out, and those sorts of things. It's kind of like Hal Elrod's book, The Miracle Morning. You have your own miracle morning. You've determined, you and Pili. So what do you say to somebody that says, I can't get out of bed really early?
Can you get out of bed 5 minutes earlier than you are? And the answer is going to be yes, because it's a choice. Not to say, because usually you say, well, I get up at 7 tomorrow, I'm trying to get up at 4:30, but you're going to put yourself in a position. It's like trying to buy that property is going to make $1 million. You're going to set yourself up for failure. It's the same thing for working out. That's why we see New Year's resolutions, like 88% of them fail, is because we set these things that we have no roadmap to get to. Oh, so on New Year's 1, I'm going to start working out every day. I haven't worked out in 250 days, but I'll work out every day for 3 hours. I'm going to lose 30 pounds in a month, right? So let's just say you can get to that end of the 30 days. Maybe you do get to that point. You can't keep it off because you set up this unsustainable process of how you react. However, you say, well, can I just get up 5 minutes earlier this week? You start doing that. Then the next week I get up 5 minutes earlier. It's saying something to commit yourself, because the most difficult thing to do in life is that we set expectations of what we want from others, but we are very generous on the expectations of ourselves, right? Oh, it's okay, I'll just have dessert tonight, or I'll have this. And sure, that's all fine in moderation. Moderation is key. However, it's that each and every day, just giving ourselves, it's okay today. Oh, I'll start tomorrow. Oh, I'll start. Right now is the moment, right? And if you create discipline in small moments, it carries through to everything. Right? Because it can give you that point. You want to buy multifamily properties? Well, there can be the runway that you want to get to a property very quickly, right? So in our mastermind, we have a bunch of people that will transition from the single family world where they've had success because they start wholesaling houses and all of a sudden they get a contract in a week, right? And so it happens very quickly and they're moving and doing their process or whatever they're doing. But they come to the multifamily world, it could take 6, 9, 12 months to be able to build up this process, and it can create a ton of net worth, generational wealth, cash flow, all other things. But you have to be consistent with these actions to create a process to be able to buy these properties, right? If you find a deal to put under contract, sounds great, but where's the loan going to come from? Where are the investors going to come from? Do you have a team in place to manage this property, right? We need to create and formulate that. And that's the small steps each day that you can control. So instead of saying that I want to be a millionaire, right? That's one that we hear a lot. Okay, you want to be a millionaire. Well, what could be one actionable thing you could do today? Well, each week I get my paycheck. Maybe instead of just going out there and spending it on a bunch of discretionary things, I start saving $100 every week. Maybe I start reading 5 pages a day, right? I start setting things that could put me in a good position to be able to make better choices so I can get to that millionaire status if that's a goal.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good advice. It reminds me of another book that I read, The Compound Effect, where Darren Hardy talks about making those small changes, kind of like you said, the 1% things. And you look back at the end of 365 days and you've made huge progress with these tiny steps that you hardly even noticed you were doing.
Yeah, it's so easy just with the power of social media today to get lost in someone else's result and feel disappointed in ourselves because they achieved this result, right? However, think of a band like, oh, this band has this hit song and they just came out of nowhere, but we don't see the 20 years they've been driving around in the back of a little bus, right? To do all these little things to get there, right? We see what's the best moment, but we forget the steps that have taken to get there. And so if we can be less critical on ourselves and stop just pointing out what we don't have and be appreciative for what we do have today, because if that was taken away, then you would be lacking that as well, right? But if we can say, okay, here's where I want to go. What do I think is the first step, right? Like if I want to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro, maybe the first step would be like, what country is this in? You know, like something as simple as that, or hey, can I find a tour guide? Or can I find something that can give me an actual step to see if I'm on the right track? You want to buy multifamily property? Well, where? Right? Maybe that's your first step. Where do I want to buy it? And you may say, okay, I want to buy in Louisville, Kentucky. Okay, so maybe I should learn about Louisville, Kentucky, right? Okay, maybe, and that will help you understand that this is a market you want to do it, or maybe it's not, right? Okay, if it's not, what didn't I like, and how can I use that to pick a better market for me? Because the result is honestly a worthless thought if you can't think about taking a step to find out if it's the right thing. So we had when we were in New Jersey, we would run a big meetup. It was great, multifamily meetup. We had a couple thousand members and we had a couple hundred meetings, and I had or a couple hundred people per meeting. And I would have a guy who would come out for like 2 years. He's like, I'm gonna get into multifamily as soon as I start flipping a home, right? And so finally got himself out of the gate, right? Finally took that step to start flipping a home. And the first one, he's like, I'm never doing this again. I just hate working with contractors, right? And it was like, you could have learned this step because we kept pushing, just take any action. And he finally did. But you could have done that by going on other people's projects, partnering with the partner. You could have learned that step so much earlier instead of just trying to learn everything you can about flipping just to start and realize the simplest part of a contractor now says, I'm never doing this again, right? And we wait too long to get ourselves in the mode of action. Like education is great, right? But you can't just keep going back for degree, and never actually going out there to use it, because then it's just lost. It goes to the grave of a great thought and but without the result of taking the action to figure out if there's a result to what you've done.
You mentioned something important there about partnering and about going all in on learning how to flip properties and finding out you didn't like it. I think about real estate investing strategies as you have kind of like dating. You have to try them, and you'll find one that kind of picks you. That's the one that sticks. But there are easier ways than flipping houses. You could partner with somebody. You could ride along and say, hey, I'll work for you a month and shadow you on this. And you go, nope, I don't want to do that. On to the next. There are simpler ways to test the waters. But at the end of the day, you're going to sort through a lot of frogs before you find the one you want to keep. You really are.
Right. You know, and for that, it's more just you need to get active to learn the better questions, right? So for investors, right? So we love our investors, they invest with us, but we want it to be the right opportunity for them, right? We want to make sure it benefits them, it's in the right spot to make a good decision, whether or not this will be a good investment at this time for them. However, we don't want them into a stage of indecision. A no is absolutely fine. We'd rather a no today. So when the time is right, they know what's in front of us, but we would like them to make that choice, right? So the no is fine, because eventually when it does become a yes in the future, they've understood why. But typically for a lot, we allow ourselves in that point of indecision, right? Where we don't make a decision and that becomes our decision. Our decision is we haven't made a decision, and that carries through to all of our moments of our real estate investing journey, where committing to any decision, at least you can rule out the no's, right? Because eventually, like as you said, with this runway for real estate, if you can start doing things, you can start eliminating stuff, right? There's 10 different ways you can do real estate, for which there's more. You can start, okay, now got 2 out of the way, got 3 out of the way, got 5 out of the way, maybe the 6th one, you're like, that's it, right? But at least you start eliminating the stuff you don't want. Get it off the plate, put your mind in a spot where you can find it, right? So it's okay to go try something and not like it. Good, you figured it out. Move to the next thing.
Mm-hmm. I like that you kind of have these micro steps and the actionable, practical advice for people here. We've just come off of COVID. I don't know if we're ever going to be completely off of it, but that we'll call it the 2 years of COVID, and people got knocked down a lot. A lot of people got knocked down mentally. Maybe they were struggling in business. So what's your advice for folks that had a hard time staying focused during that 2-year period? I know some people that are actually almost trying to rebuild. Their businesses took a hit during that time for one reason or another. How does someone stay focused and then build back after any event that kind of knocks them down?
Life is a series of events where if everything was perfect, 75 and sunny every day, we wouldn't appreciate it. Right. And so if you think of that point, like imagine the sun never went down. Well, then if it just stayed up all the time, then we wouldn't appreciate when it comes up. We wouldn't appreciate the same thing. The same thing when it rained every day. We wouldn't just be rain every day. Right. So if you look at life in its own point, COVID was that experience where the entire world was doing something at the same point. Right. The same point was the first time we ever had that pinnacle moment where everybody had the same thing in front of them. And now what's happened is there's been different results from it. And some people, unfortunately, their businesses suffered and other things, but that's not you, right? It's not your business is what you're doing here, but we get lost in the business is me, right? And so I'm a failure, but you're not. It's something that happened. It's been a result. So it's saying, okay, that has happened. Now, what is going to become me is how I react to it, right? And that's that point of that we can all think how our reactions to what we think is what sets the stage for where we want to go. And if you can look at my business suffering being a moment is that, okay, it's you, right? And other people are going through the same journey too, but there is a route. Other people have gotten out of the scenario I'm in, whether I know them or not, it has happened and I can too. And I have to look forward to what could be a potential path forward, not look for the moment, right? So if I'm suffering in my business today, and a decision is not going to solve the problem tomorrow, but a good decision can at least start opening the door to start bringing the light back in to say, okay, I can do this. Let's take a deep breath. Let's look at what's in front of me and be serious with what's in front of me, because maybe I can start to uncover things, right? So it'd be like someone getting control of their finances, right? Well, okay, I need to control my finances. Well, what are you spending? Well, I have no idea, right? Well, the first stage would be like, well, okay, let's print out your bank statement. Like, what are you spending every month, right? Like, what are these recurring expenses? Like, you have 9 subscriptions to TV channels. Why don't we could cancel those? Maybe there's $150, right? So there's a path forward, but we have to take a moment, take a deep breath, look at ourselves, not as failures, but just, okay, we're assessing ourselves, just like you would assess your business, or just like why you made a choice. And that's the easiest, hardest thing to do, right? Take the moment, do it. Now it's the hardest thing, but that's why you're here making these commitments to yourself, right? Because you no longer will be on a path to say that, oh, woe is me. Because the easiest thing to say is that, like, this is happening to you, but if it wasn't happening, who do you want it to happen to, right? So you are the person that's in the power position to be able to handle this. That's why it's been put in front of you, and you will get through this. But it's small choices today of just looking and being critical with the moment in time. Because again, this moment in time is a moment in time. It's not you. It's just a moment in time that you'll get through. But your steps through the journey are what's going to lead you to either the good side or the side that you don't want the result from.
Yeah, that is such good advice. And that is advice that everyone can take, whether it's a big issue like COVID, or whether it's something small like they have a temporary financial problem. You have to take the steps. That you've done such a great job of laying that out. I thanks so much for coming on the show today, Jason. You and Pili have built such a good business, an inspiring business. And I know that you inspire a lot of people because you all have such very practical advice and practical ways of doing things. And like I said, I am all about your focus. Don't think I'm not kind of watching you as you do all of these things.
And I'm not perfect. I have my moments of doubt, just like everyone else, right? But it's a short-lived moment that you have to constantly look at it and say, okay, what's the lesson here, right? And The good part, Pili, I have my beautiful wife who is constantly there in that support mode, and I'm there for her too, that, we're both going to go in different arenas, of just how it is. And we just have learned that there's so much good in this world, and we can either focus on the negative or focus on the positive. And there's a lot more positive out there to focus on than there is the negative, but it's really where our attention goes, right? If our attention stays in the negative, we're going to have negative thoughts. If we say, okay, yes, that's there, let's look at the positive. Right. So, my mom said to me, I wish the news would stop scaring me. I was like, stop watching the news. Just stop watching the news. Like what's happening in the news is not like, it's not affecting you like right now in this moment. It's not like something happening in the news is ultimately going to ripple to you right now. Like, sure, there's things happening, but most of that has nothing to do with your life. Right. So let's look at what we can control, because that's what we can control. The other stuff outside of it is more that if we can control, it gives us more time to deal with the things that come up that we don't have control over.
Great advice. What's the best way for folks to get in touch with you, Jason?
Sure. So you can go over to yarusiholdings.com, YARUSI holdings.com. Also, Jason@yarusiholdings.com is my email right there to talk all about our company, what we do here at Yarusi Holdings, Multifamily Live Podcast, Mastermind, more things in there.
And I will put all of those links in the show notes, folks. You want to be sure and check them out. If you want to learn about multifamily investing, there are so many ways that you can do that with Jason and Pili. So I'll put the links. Be sure to check them out. If you have some money sitting around, you want to invest with Jason, I'm sure he'd be happy to have a conversation with you. So thanks again, Jason. And thanks to all the listeners for coming out today. And please share this show and leave us a rating and a review over on iTunes. It helps people to find us, and I would really appreciate it. And I will see you same time, same place next week. Bye for now.